Hey there Internet, Fane Macca here, and this is my spoiler review for Star Wars The Force Awakens. Now we're going to be getting really deep into the story here. I'm going to pull no punches. I'm going to be talking about everything that happens in the movie. So if you haven't seen this film yet, I recommend you close down the video for now, go and watch it, and then come back here. And then you can see what I thought, see if you agree, and discuss it in the comments below. So the first thing I want to talk about is the way the setting has changed since Return of the Jedi. It's been about 30 years since the end of the 6th film, and a lot has changed. When we last joined the Rebel Alliance, they were victorious over the Emperor and Darth Vader, and the second Death Star had been destroyed. But now they're back on the run again as the Resistance, and the Empire has been reborn as this new organisation called the First Order. This First Order seems to be spearheaded by two shady, dark-side individuals. You've got one supreme leader, Snoke, played by Andy Serkis, who is in the background, in the shadows. We don't get to see a lot of him. And then in the foreground, you've got his sort of face man, Kylo Ren, who is obviously his dark-side apprentice. And it's very much the same Emperor-Darth Vader dynamic that we have before. Now, I do have a bit of a problem with this because it feels very much like the entire setting has just gone right back to the way it was before the original trilogy. You've got the Empire in charge, you've got these two dark side individuals calling all the shots, and you've got the Resistance on the run. It just feels to me like nothing has changed. All the stuff that happened in A New Hope, Empire and Jedi has just been glossed over, and we're back to the start again. And it doesn't really sit well with me, that, just negating the original trilogy like that. I'm sure that wasn't the intention of it, but it's the way it ends up coming across. We're back to Stormtroopers and Star Destroyers all over the place, and X-Wings and Millennium Falcons fighting against them, basically. One thing I did have a bit of trouble with is the fact that in just 30 years, the entire Rebel Alliance and all the heroes of the Rebels have become myths, essentially. Nobody in the mainstream public seems to know about Luke Skywalker or Han Solo. Although when you think about it, even if they weren't hailed as heroes by the public, they'd still be portrayed as villains by the Empire-run news media while they were performing their terrorist acts. So it seems a little bit weird that they've just been completely forgotten and they're almost treated like legends. But then again, when you think about it, in the original trilogy we had the Jedi completely forgotten after just 20 years. So I guess that's something we can give a pass to. Now we do see a change in the status of our heroes from the films. Luke Skywalker has tried to set up a Jedi Academy, and unfortunately that met with disaster, and since then he's retreated into hiding. And everybody who's anybody in the galaxy is looking to find him, because they want him to either sort out all the problems, or they're worried that he could put a stop to their plans. One of the people looking for Luke is Leia, no longer a princess, but now a general in the Resistance. We also have a sort of Republic remnant supporting the Resistance, but it's not very clearly defined what sort of influence they have or anything. It's hinted that they're just in a limited number of systems. It's mentioned that there is a Senate, but we see nothing of that. They completely avoid any kind of galactic politics, which, to be honest, after the prequels, who can blame them for wanting to do that? But the Republic is just sort of pushed off to one side, and in fact halfway through the movie, the planet that serves as the capital for the Republic, which I can't remember them naming properly, maybe they mentioned it in passing afterwards, but they blow up this planet and essentially destroy the Republic, eliminate it from any kind of power plays in the galaxy. So now it's just the First Order versus the Resistance, so you're back to Empire and Rebels once again. In addition to that, we've got Han Solo and Chewbacca. They've gone back to their smugglers' ways. It seems to be that they're pulling sort of con tricks on different pirate guilds around the galaxy, and they've got into debt with various different gangsters. During the course of the past 30 years, they've lost the Millennium Falcon. It's been traded from one criminal to another until it's ended up on a junk heap on the planet of Jakku. We start off with one of the Resistance's top pilots, named Poe. Not quite. A little bit better. Close enough. Heading down to the planet of Jakku to find a map that will lead to Luke Skywalker. During the course of his visit to Jakku, the First Order arrive in pursuit of him, and they besiege the village where he is. In order to prevent the sensitive information from ending up in the First Order's hands, Poe gives the map fragment to BB-8, his faithful droid, and sends him off into the desert to try and find a way to get it back to the Resistance. So we find ourselves in an almost carbon copy of the plot of A New Hope, where you've got a brave rebel soldier captured by the evil Empire, and sending a droid to do his work for him and carry this vital piece of information to the people who need to see it. Poe is then taken up to the Star Destroyer in orbit, where he is kept in captivity and interrogated by the fearsome Kylo Ren. And during the course of this, he meets John Boyega's character, Finn, a stormtrooper who's having second thoughts about his allegiance to the First Order. Finn then helps Poe to escape from the Empire, and the two of them head down to the planet's surface, crashing their stolen TIE fighter, and Finn gets separated from Poe, and Poe seems to have died. Back on the planet, BB-8 has fallen in with Rey, played by Daisy Ridley. She's a feisty scavenger who was abandoned on the planet Jakku by her family and is still waiting for them to return. Two of them eventually meet up with Finn, and the trio steal the Millennium Falcon off the junk pile where it's been sitting for the past few years and try to outrun the First Order. During the course of this, they meet up with Han Solo and Chewbacca and decide to get the map fragment back to the Resistance by some way or another. All the while, we've got the First Order following them, and we get to learn a little bit more about our villains. So, as I said in the other review, you've got your General Hux, who doesn't actually do anything much in the story other than shout orders around, and you've got Captain Phasma, who was a really wasted character compared to the potential that she seemed to have. The person who's perhaps the most important to learn something about in the First Order is Kylo Ren. He's the mysterious, masked, hooded, red lightsaber-wielding maniac that we have to deal with. And during the first half of the movie, he is really impressive. The modulation on his voice that the mask gives him makes him feel like a very unique character, with an echo back to Darth Vader, but not too much reliance on it. What we get to see of Kylo Ren using the Force is really intimidating. You see him stop a blaster bolt in mid-air, and rather than just deflecting it off his hand or something like that, he actually keeps it stationary, suspended in mid-air, almost frozen in time, until he moves out of the way, which seems like something much more powerful than anything we ever saw Darth Vader doing. You also get to see Kylo Ren in an interrogation, where he's questioning Poe about the location of the map fragment. And during this scene, you get to see Poe trying to resist the power that Kylo Ren is displaying. And you do think that maybe it's going to be that cliche where the hero is strong enough that he's going to resist, but then just moments later Kylo Ren walks out and he's ripped the information right out of Poe's brain without any resistance. And that truly does make him an intimidating character. It makes him seem like a genuinely vile, dangerous, powerful individual. Now, during the course of the movie, we do learn that Kylo Ren is playing second fiddle to a much more powerful, much more sinister character called Supreme Leader Snoke, played by Andy Serkis. This character is kept mysterious deliberately, but seems like a very much an Emperor type of character. Again, he's sitting in the shadows, he's robed, he's got this wrinkled face, all scarred up. We only ever see him through holograms. Unfortunately, the CGI on these hologram effects is pretty bad, and the character just ends up looking cartoonish. But we don't learn that much about Supreme Leader Snoke anyway. He appears for a couple of scenes, has a few sentences, and we never see him again. The focus in this movie is on Kylo Ren, and so we'd better talk about him. During the course of the movie, we find out that Kylo Ren was actually one of Luke Skywalker's former students. Not only that, but he's Luke's nephew, the son that Leia had with Han that turned to the dark side thanks to the seduction of Supreme Leader Snoke. Now, unfortunately, I felt that this twist, it was trying to call too much on the Darth Vader I am your father moment, trying to get that sort of family drama going on there, which didn't really work, but it also meant that when you finally get to see Kylo Ren's face, he removes the mask, and you've had this terrifying, brooding, fury-driven character who's been genuinely scary, spine-chilling almost. And then he takes off his mask, and he's basically an angsty teenager. He's got the long black hair, which might as well be brushed in front of his eyes so that he can say that the world is pain and he doesn't want to look on it. He's got some sort of anger issues with his father, and it just completely took away any dignity and weight from the character. And unfortunately, he never really recovers from that. Later on in the movie, even when he puts the mask back on, you still know what's behind there, behind that facade, and you just can't take it seriously anymore. It's not like Darth Vader, where they built up and built up who he was, and then eventually when you do get to see Darth Vader's face, he's this weak, frail old man inside the suit. But you've learned so much about him that you can understand why he is that. With Kylo Ren, they revealed his identity and his true nature too quickly. But in addition to that, there's one other huge plot point we need to talk about with Kylo Ren, and that is where he faces off against his father for the final time. And when I say final time, it is exactly what it sounds like. Kylo Ren kills Han Solo in such a way that it's clear the character is not going to be coming back. Now, to be honest, this wasn't a surprise to me. As soon as I learned who Kylo Ren was and started seeing the anger issues he had against his father, I knew they were building up to this scene. I did think it was going to be in a later movie, and it was a bit surprising that they did it now, but it didn't have any shock value to it at all. And to be honest, it felt like quite a manipulative move on the filmmaker's part, where they're trying to engage the emotions of the audience by taking away a beloved character. Now, I really don't like this scene, and not just because it's a beloved character that gets killed off, but I feel that it wasn't executed well. There could have been so many other ways to do it better. We don't have any build-up between these two characters, no prior confrontations to build up the dynamic between father and son, and make it so that this scene was a linchpin of their relationship. As it was, they had no on-screen time until this final confrontation, which lasts all of a couple of minutes. But as I said, it feels like a manipulative move on the part of the filmmakers. But in addition to that, it didn't feel particularly heroic for Han. There are numerous ways that you can take out a character and make it feel like it mattered. This one just felt like such a mundane moment, to be honest. It didn't have any gravitas to it that it needed for such a significant character. And of course there's the fact that we're seeing Han Solo get cut down by Kylo Ren, who at this point we have established is just a whiny teenager who has daddy issues. And it just didn't seem like an appropriate death for a beloved character like this. Now with that said, the remainder of the plot is fairly standard. The First Order has some sort of super weapon that they can use to destroy entire star systems. They apparently decided that the Emperor wasn't thinking big enough when he created a space station the size of a moon that can destroy planets, so they decided to go one better and transformed an entire planet into a weapon. Not only that, but this weapon absorbs an entire sun just to fire once. Now, as ridiculous as that sounds, it does lead to ultimately the same plot again that we've seen in both A New Hope and Return of the Jedi. This super weapon needs to be destroyed. There's one weakness that needs to be taken out, which will cause the entire thing to collapse. And so we have Red Squadron going after this weakness. We've got heroes on the ground trying to take out the shields so that the heroes above in the starships can get in and do their thing. And ultimately, it just feels like exactly the same steps we've seen before, not once but twice in Star Wars movies. And yeah, the heroes win, the weapon is destroyed, none of the villains are killed, they all get away and they're promising vengeance further down the line because we've got 2 more movies we've got to get through. And then the movie kind of just stops. We have a brief scene where Rey, Daisy Ridley, goes off and finds Luke Skywalker, tracking him down with the finally completed map, but that doesn't go anywhere. That's setting up for the next movie. And other than that, there's no medal ceremony, no Ewok celebration, just the movie ends. Delving into the characters a little bit, we've got the character of Finn, who starts off as a stormtrooper, deployed for his first battle, and he can't cope with it. He gets scared when he sees his fellow soldiers dying, and can't get on board with some of the dark acts that the stormtroopers are having to carry out. Now, of course, this gets him singled out by Captain Phasma and put off for examination, but nothing turns up, and so they put him back to work, and that's when he decides that he's going to defect from the First Order and help Poe to escape, and then use him to steal a TIE fighter and fly away. Now, to me, this felt very rushed, because you don't really get a chance to know the character and to know the moral quandary that he's going through. He starts off in stormtrooper armour, and then he decides he doesn't want to be a stormtrooper anymore. It felt very rushed. I feel there was more consideration given to the character of Rey. It's established that she's living this very frugal life on Jakku, scavenging for parts, trading those parts just to get a meal for the day. And it shows her living inside a hollowed out Imperial walker, cooking up her food and just struggling to make ends meet for herself and just looking out for number one while she's waiting for the return of her family who vanished so long ago. And I feel like she was given much more personality because of that. It meant that you could sympathise with her a bit more. Later on in the movie, Rey gets captured by the First Order. Kylo Ren knows that she has the information in her head to help him find Luke Skywalker, and he believes he can rip it from her, just like he did from so many people before. But unfortunately, it turns out that Rey is actually Force sensitive, and she's coming to terms with her power. It's hinted that she's known about this ability to a certain extent for some time. She's shown to have really good reflexes. As was shown with Anakin, she's a really good pilot and a natural with technology. All these sort of moments of intuition, which are believed to be accredited to Force sensitivity, are shown in her. So it does make sense that she becomes the sort of Jedi hopeful of the series, the replacement Luke Skywalker. However, at the same time, she seems to discover her powers a little too quickly for my liking. There are moments where she's suddenly showing an understanding of the Force that she didn't have before, without receiving any training. For example, one moment where she's captured and she Jedi mind tricks a guard into undoing her restraints and leaving the room open so that she can just walk out. And then at another point she's able to mentally resist Kylo Ren when he's trying to interrogate her. Now, while a certain amount of natural Force affinity seems okay, the fact that she has no training at all, it just seems like the Force is giving her powers for whatever is convenient for the plot. Now, I'm going to say something a bit controversial here, but BB-8, the new droid that gets introduced, is an incredible character. He's got a personality, even though he's just like R2-D2, beeps and bloops, and that's all it. But I'm going to say he is much better than R2-D2. Now, I know that's kind of shocking, but when I say that, I feel that the way BB-8 was animated and the way any animatronics were done and so on were much more expressive and given much more of a personality than R2-D2 was ever able to achieve. I don't know whether that's because of limitations of the time that it was made or whether it's just the different direction, but I really do feel that BB-8 is the superior sidekick character of the Star Wars series, and I would say he's one of my favourite characters of the entire saga. Chewbacca's part in the film is really well done. Even though you can't understand a word that this guy is saying, he's still absolutely lovable, and every scene that he's in is golden, especially the interaction with Han Solo, because, of course, Han Solo, Harrison Ford, he's a timeless classic, and the two of them working together, surviving scrapes, shooting down stormtroopers, all that good stuff, just perfect, absolutely perfect. And the scene where you get him reuniting with an old friend who is some sort of mercenary broker or something, who just happens to be running a cantina where they can get transportation back to the Resistance. It really builds on the character and makes him feel like the old character that we came to know and love. I will say the treatment of the Force in this movie is really well done. It's much more mystical than it was in the prequels. There's a sort of sense of wonder and magic to it that we didn't get before. You see the certain use of powers where it's sometimes quite eerie, sometimes unsettling. There's certain items have a significance in the Force, which means that they are projecting visions into characters' minds and possibly twisting minds in certain ways, which I really like because I feel like that's the true essence of the Force, is this mystical, difficult to define, difficult to understand element to it. But at the same time, it's clearly having an impact on each and every person in the story. And of course, I mean, it's got to be better than little beings in your blood putting voices in your head to talk to you. Now I will say that the movie seems to run on convenience. It seems to be that convenience is the greatest friend of the screenwriter for this movie, because every time the movie needs something, it just magically appears out of the air. The main characters need to get off Jakku. There just happens to be the Millennium Falcon within reach. They go off into space and they just happen to bump into Han Solo and Chewbacca immediately. And this goes on and on throughout the movie, contrivance after contrivance, which can seem a little bit cheap, but at the same time you can forgive a certain amount of it for the sake of the plot. So, like I said, I really feel that the story of this movie was the weakest part of it. The visuals were good, the characters were okay, the returning cast were really well done and felt really necessary to the movie, and the little nods to the previous series were well done. You've got little bits like Admiral Akbar makes an appearance, just a brief cameo, the Millennium Falcon having the motivator break again, all these sorts of things. Having Rey be a mechanic who can actually work the Millennium Falcon, and Han Solo and Chewbacca are both quite impressed with their skill, and even invite her to join their crew, which I thought was a nice touch. We do have an interesting scene where Kylo Ren is meditating at some sort of a shrine, and it turns out he's retrieved the burnt-up mask of Darth Vader, and he's sort of idolised his grandfather, used him as a pattern to follow, believing that he was the prime example of the dark side and the true expression of what he needs to become. In addition to that, we do have an interesting plotline where the lightsaber that once belonged to Anakin Skywalker and was passed down to Luke surfaces. Now obviously this has been retrieved from Cloud City at some point. How that's done is never explained, never made clear, but it does tie the plot together because you've got this link to the past, the link to Luke Skywalker and Anakin Skywalker, but also you've got the main characters receiving this lightsaber and it being wielded by both Rey and Finn, and also you've got Kylo Ren lusting after it because it belonged to his grandfather, and he believes that his grandfather is the epitome of the dark side, who he wants to aspire to be like. But ultimately, I don't feel like J.J. Abrams was the right person to make these movies. Like I said before, I feel there's too much of the Star Trek movies in this Star Wars. They're becoming too similar, and there's just not enough of the spirit that was in the original trilogy here. What we ended up getting was Rebel Alliance versus Empire 2.0, just another Darth Vader-like character, another Emperor-like character, and we've got our sort of Luke Skywalker, Han Solo replacements coming in. In fact, they literally do replace Han Solo. They have the character of Rey taking his captain's seat on the Millennium Falcon and flying off with Chewie as her co-pilot. You also have very underused characters, like I've said, General Hux, Captain Phasma, criminally underused, but also you have the character of Poe, who seemed to be more significant to the setting than we were allowed to see in the movie. He's meant to be the Resistance's best pilot, and of course we think he's dead, and then it turns out later that he's not, and so he's leading the attack squadrons and so on, and it just feels like we should have had more time with him, learned a little bit more about him. Maybe we'll learn more about these characters, and that'll help establish this sequel trilogy as something completely different, but as it is at the moment, they've retreaded a lot of ground in the way of plot. One other thing that did bother me afterwards, but not while I was watching the film, is I realised that I didn't know any of the locations that we went to during the movie. Even thinking back on it now, aside from Jakku, I can't name any of the planets that the characters went to, and I don't believe any of them are in pre-established Star Wars lore. For example, when the Republic is destroyed and the Senate wiped out by the First Order's giant superweapon, they mention that it's an entire star system, but I don't know which one. At first I thought maybe it was going to be Coruscant, but they never explicitly state that. It's never made clear whether it's actually somewhere that we know, somewhere that is important to us or important to the characters. And because of that, the entire destruction of a star system has no real emotional impact. When you think back to A New Hope and the destruction of Alderaan, we had investment in that because we could see that Leia was invested in it. We knew that was her home planet. She was the royalty of that planet. So everybody there, every life on that planet, was her responsibility. But with this one, there's no connection to this planet. There's nobody who you can turn to and say, oh, that was his home, what a shame, or anything like that. So there's zero payoff for such a brutal act by the bad guys. I just really would have liked to have seen more from these movies, some more added to the setting, rather than retreading so much ground while providing us with lesser villains and really just reverting the galaxy back to the way it was at the start of A New Hope and undoing all the work that went into the original trilogy. I suppose, in the end, it was always going to be a difficult task to make this movie because you've got to pay homage to the original trilogy. You also got to bear in mind the continuity of the prequel trilogy as well. And it was just going to be a bit of a messy production to begin. We've got to introduce all these new characters, get new organisations on the go, and it's very difficult to do that without just retreading the same steps. Now, just to be clear, I didn't hate this movie. I did enjoy myself while I was watching it, and I do think that the first half of the movie, the first hour or so, up until they leave Jakku, is really well done. And then, to be honest, it's once you get to the point where they unmask Kylo Ren, that's the point where it really stopped feeling like a true Star Wars experience, and more like some sort of modernised half-breed of the movie. Much like the Star Trek reboots. I'm really sorry if this whole review seems a bit schizophrenic, but to be honest, my feelings on the movie are the same. It's no clear-cut good or bad situation. There's a lot about this movie to love, but at the same time there's a lot that really, really gets on my nerves, and I think it's going to be the same for a lot of Star Wars fans. So those were my in-depth thoughts on the story of Star Wars The Force Awakens. What did you guys think? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Do you think that the choices that Abrams has made in this movie were a good thing? If so, let me know in the comments below. Get some discussion going, and of course, because this is the spoiler review, feel free to discuss in it as much depth as possible. If you like this video and would like to see me do more videos on movies, make sure to let me know in the comments below, hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and I'll be sure to try and do something new and different next time. But until then, I'll see you guys later. Thane Maka, out.